Boom, boom, potato.
Did that sound canned?
You're mocking me.
No, I'm serious.
Do you want to do it again?
Okay, pick up. Beep. You are listening to The Hero's Journey. I'm Dan Zarzana.
And I'm Jeff Garvin.
Let the journey begin.
Welcome to the show. Before we go further, please stop and take a moment to share this podcast. If you're driving, just tell Siri or Cortana or Alexa or whatever your phone has to remind you to tweet about us or Facebook about us. And as always, the best thing you can do is review us on iTunes. That makes a difference for us.
This is episode 10, Rear Window. Oh, that's a terrible Jimmy Stewart impression.
Let's try that again, Nicolas Cage.
This is episode 10, Rear Window.
Spoiler alert! We're going to talk about the whole movie, start to finish. Consider yourself warned.
Rear Window was released in 1954 by Paramount Pictures, starring James Stewart, Grace Kelly, Wendell Corey, Thelma Ritter, and Raymond Burr. It was written by John Michael Hayes, based on Cornell Woolrich's 1942 short story, It Had to Be Murder, and directed by suspense master Alfred Hitchcock. The film was nominated for 4 Oscars: Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best Color Cinematography.
Right, color cinematography.
Back in the days when black and white films were
it's going to go the
common
way.
enough.
Yeah, it's like 3D films will never stick. Color.
Talkies.
Color photography.
And Best Sound Recording.
0 wins, though.
Yeah.
Perhaps no Oscar wins. And 0 Golden Globe nods. WTF. On the Waterfront beat it out for Best Director and Best Screenplay, whatever.
And that is a good movie.
And the only consolation is that Grace Kelly did win Best Actress, but for a totally different picture called The Country Girl.
Which I've not seen that
Never
one,
even heard of that.
Yeah.
She beat Judy Garland and Audrey Hepburn. Go Grace.
Yeah, that's pretty top quality talent there for a relative newcomer.
Yeah.
Grace Kelly's film career lasted about 6 years.
Really?
Before she retired and became Princess Grace of Monaco.
I did not know that. And that's funny because I did not know the whole Princess Grace Monaco story until reading about this film. For those of you who don't know, Grace Kelly went on to marry the Prince of Monaco and become Princess Grace. And actually, when the U.S. released a Grace Kelly postage stamp, they called her Grace Kelly because there's a law against having foreign heads of state on U.S. postage. So Monaco issued a stamp.
Wow.
Monaco issued a stamp that said Princess Grace, and the U.S. co-issued a stamp that said Grace Kelly. That was really interesting.
How interesting. All right, so we'll have to keep a lookout for the Meghan Markle stamp.
Tidbit, this is the only film in which Grace Kelly can be seen smoking a cigarette. She refused to do it for any other film.
Rear Window had a budget of $1 million and made $36.8 million at the box office.
That's amazing. 30
times return on investment, yeah. Another tidbit, the whole film was shot on one set, which consisted of 31 apartments, 12 of which were fully furnished, had electricity and running water.
That's amazing.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
And the actress who played Miss Torso, Georgine Darcy, pretty much lived in the apartment for the duration of the filming. Saved production on rent costs.
Yeah.
Having to put her up in a hotel for a month.
It was like SAG scale minus rent. The apartment, Jeff's apartment, was built at stage level, and then they excavated the floor of the sound stage to build that courtyard. It was about 25 feet below stage level.
Isn't that amazing?
And it's funny because when you see films from the 50s and 60s, sometimes you see like the cheesy background that's clearly either a scrim or, forced perspective buildings, and the sky's not quite right. But in the Technicolor days, and when you had, the kind of budget that Hitch could command back then, because $1 million was a lot of money for a movie, they really made it look cool. I mean, it really gave it a character. You lived inside that neighborhood for the entire duration of the 2-hour film.
Yeah. It looks like a lived-in courtyard.
Yeah. Another little tidbit. It took 1,000 arc lights to simulate sunlight for the daytime scenes. The lights got so hot at one point that they set off the sprinklers in the soundstage.
Right. That's why it rains so much. That wasn't fake rain. They
went with it. They just went with it.
Yeah. And with the exception of a couple of shots, all of the shots in this film originate from Jeff's apartment.
Right.
There's a couple of quick shots that the camera is placed somewhere else, which I found odd.
I'm trying to think which shots. Do you remember?
Yes. There's one shot of Miss Torso on her balcony when the dog owner is yelling at everybody.
Oh, and then at the end,
it's a weird perspective.
After Jeff falls out the window.
Well, yeah, because Jeff's not in his apartment anymore.
Right.
So
we've changed his. Good eye, Dan.
Anyway,
Should we dive in?
Journey on.
All right, Act 1. Okay, so in a strange twist, I had the most trouble with Act 1 this time around.
Really?
I think some of the elements appear out of order, so it'll be interesting to see if we bump heads. Okay, you agree? Okay, well, we'll see. I also realized as I was editing The Godfather and listening to Moonlight, just because my vanity knows no bounds, and I listen to my own podcast sometimes, I realized that in past episodes, I don't know if I want to say we or I have clung to a lot of plot summary and with particular attachment to retelling the story in order, as though the listener hasn't seen the movie or read the book, and so I feel the need to like explain the plot.
Yeah, and I guess our assumption is that people either have read the book or seen the film that we're talking about,
right?
Or they just don't care about spoilers and they just hopefully want to hear our discussion.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm going to try to get away from that plot summary attachment in this episode and just really zoom in on the elements of the hero's journey.
I should do that too.
Well, let's try, because
let's try it.
You know what? It was The Rock. The Rock, so much happens.
Because like all that is plot. It's just a super plot movie.
Ordinary world, or as Campbell put it, world of common day, where we see our main character in their status quo normal life. We meet our hero, Stella, the insurance company nurse.
Oh my God, you're going to do this again. Get out of my house.
I'm sorry. I was trying to think, who's the least likely?
The
Miss
dog.
Torso. Yeah, the dog. No, our hero is LB Jeff Jeffries. He's a well-known magazine photographer who specializes in action shots, which we learn as the camera floats around his apartment, kind of showing off his work, including a dramatic photo of a race car crash that broke his leg. And in this first scene, Jeff's editor calls, and we learn that Jeff's on week 6 of a 7-week medical leave. He's got a cast on one leg from toes to waist. He's stuck in a wheelchair, and he's going stir crazy.
Right.
And he jokes to his editor in a little moment of foreshadowing that if he doesn't get out of here soon, he's going to do something drastic, maybe even get married.
Right.
So there's another character in this film that we have to acknowledge, which is the setting, this courtyard where all these apartments look in. It's almost a character in the film. So during this opening sequence, Hitchcock establishes the neighborhood where Jeff lives. It's a working class part of Greenwich Village in Manhattan. It's a hot summer in New York, and the camera takes us on a tour of several apartment buildings that are all facing the same courtyard, where we meet a host of interesting neighbors.
Yep.
We meet the songwriter who's constantly suffering at the piano, apparently trying to write his opus. An older couple who sleep head to foot on the fire escape because it's too hot inside, and they have a dog that becomes important. Ms. Torso, whom you mentioned, the actress lived in her apartment. She's a dancer who likes to parade around her apartment in lingerie with the windows open. It's a glaring pre-Me Too moment in the movie. And it's funny because... What?
I was going to mention something about the script.
Oh, yeah, the screenplay.
The introduction to Miss Torso in the script is way more sexual than it is in the film. Like, she's nude, and there are strategically placed shadows covering her breasts.
Yeah, it's almost like that. The way the script is written, it's almost like that Austin Powers scene where he's nude, but with,
he's the melon, like holding melons,
strategically placed melons and cucumbers and stuff. This movie pushed the envelope in several ways in terms of the censorship that was going on in '54. When Grace Kelly's character spends the night or says, "I'm going to spend the night," that was a scandal. And it's the reason why his cast had to be up to his belly button, so that it would be clear that no nookie was going to happen. Because women didn't spend the night in a part. It was like, and remember, because it's like does your landlord know?
The scene about the whole letting your landlord know and all that stuff. I think that's one of the fun and interesting aspects of watching older films, is seeing what was societally accepted then versus now.
The editor makes this comment after Jimmy Stewart says, "Can you imagine me being married and coming home to a nagging wife?" And the editor says, "Wives don't nag, they discuss." Right. And he says, "Maybe in your neighborhood." Okay, so these neighbors appear throughout the movie, and they're each playing out their own little dramas, which add context and tension to the film. But for the sake of sticking to the hero's journey, I'm not really going to mention them much during my part of the analysis.
Oh, okay.
And then there's the salesman, played by Raymond Burr, who has... But by the way, I watched the movie twice before I realized that was Raymond Burr. It's just a very strange casting for him. And he's much bigger and that kind of chubbier than I've seen him before, and his white hair. It was just really weird. He looked really weird in that movie to me.
He looked very Scandinavian.
Yeah, Thorwald, right. So salesman, he has a chronically ill wife who mistreats him terribly. He's like waits on her like a servant, but she taunts him and laughs at him.
Yeah.
And he's clearly just had it with
Criticizes his cooking.
Yeah, like she throws a roll.
Like a bread roll or something across the bed or something.
So just to recap World of Common Day, Jeff's a photographer stuck in a wheelchair with nothing better to do than spy on his crazy neighbors.
Call to Adventure, where the hero is presented with a challenge which renders him unable to continue living in the comfort of the ordinary world. Now, here is where I started...
That's where you had problems?
This is where I started to struggle. At what point is the call? I think the adventure is very clear, but what's the call? So I see a couple of adventures here. There's kind of a romantic struggle with Jeff and his girlfriend, Lisa, played by Grace Kelly. Lisa wants to move forward with their relationship, and he isn't comfortable with that yet. There's also, of course, the murder mystery.
Right.
One of the aspects of the film that I noticed while I was watching it multiple times in preparation for this was you mentioned the neighbors. And I saw the neighbors as potential representations of what Jeff's potential future states could be.
Totally.
There's the married couple with the dog that they seem to have like a mundane life. Well, Jeff is an adventure photographer. He travels all over the world. So he doesn't want that life.
Yeah.
There's also Miss Lonely Hearts, who appears to be roughly his age, like 40s, maybe, and she's single. And she goes through a very emotional period of time throughout this film. And that represents kind of a risk to Jeff of remaining alone and what could happen to him if he continues to reject the romantic adventure.
Totally agree.
Here.
And there's the newlywed couple who are
the
constantly
newlywed
shagging,
couple.
right? Yeah.
Well, that's the...
He tries to put his head out the window to have a cigarette, and she's like, honey!
Yeah, they've got the shades drawn all the time, and that's remarked upon by a character later on. I thought that was pretty funny. Anyway, I found it interesting that Lisa is 20 years his junior.
Yeah, in the script, he's 35.
He's 35, but Jamie Stewart was 45 during the filming, and
she was
Grace Kelly was 25.
Yeah.
Both adventures are introduced to us through a conversation between Jeff and the insurance company nurse, Stella, played by Thelma Ritter. He's looking out the window at his neighbors, and she comes in and starts teasing him about being a peeping Tom and how it's dangerous, and she smells trouble. He gets to looking out the window, sees things he shouldn't see, trouble ensues. So that's she's kind of heralding that adventure. And then they start talking about Lisa Fremont, Jeff's girlfriend, and how he doesn't want to marry her. She wants to get married. Stella says, "You're an idiot. Marry her."
Yeah, right.
So later that evening, Lisa comes to visit Jeff. Lisa is introduced as pretty much a perfect partner.
Right.
Maybe like a dream, a fantasy partner. She's gorgeous. She's a professional. She works in the fashion industry. She is kind. She's elegant. She is generous. She reveals that she has ordered dinner from a fancy restaurant called 21. This is way before Uber Eats.
Right. Grubhub.
So she is presenting herself as a perfect partner for Jeff. And like Stella said, the perfect girl for any man with 2 eyes and a heartbeat, or something along those lines.
Apparently, beautiful sophisticates are dropping out of the sky to date working class, grubby, curmudgeonly photographers.
And she begins the discussion about the possibility of Jeff quitting his job at the magazine that forces him to travel all over the world into dangerous places and settling down in New York, opening his own studio there and doing fashion photography, which she offers to help him with. So I think that is kind of the call to adventure for the romantic part of the story.
Agree.
Later that night, Jeff is sitting looking out the window as he does every night, and he hears a scream and a crash of broken glass, and that is the call to adventure, I think, for the murder mystery.
100% agree.
So those are the two call to adventures as I see them.
Which leads us to refusal of the call. Confronted with fear of the unknown, our hero refuses to engage in the adventure. So for the romantic call to adventure, I think the refusal's obvious. Jeff tells Lisa they're not a match. He'll never settle down, and she won't be able to deal with life on the road. And so they argue, and she gets up to leave, and he says, "When will I see you again?" And then in this classic line with a brilliant delivery by Grace Kelly, she says,
"Not for a long time. At least, not until tomorrow night."
So his refusal is that he maintains the status quo, refusing to take on the romantic adventure of a deeper relationship.
Right.
I don't think Jeff refuses the call to solve the mystery. In fact, he pursues it fairly relentlessly.
That comes from without.
Yeah, the refusal here is from without, in the form of Stella, the insurance company nurse, and Lisa, and Jeff's old war buddy, Detective Doyle, who all tell Jeff he's reading too much into the events that he's observed.
Yes, agreed.
So that concludes my refusal of the call. Anything you would add?
No, I have exactly the same thing. Meeting with the mentor, or as Campbell calls it, supernatural aid, the unexpected assistance that comes to one who has undertaken his proper adventure. I see Stella as a mentor with regard to the romantic adventure. She's the one who is encouraging Jeff to accept Lisa's advances. In terms of supernatural assistance from Campbell's perspective, I had a tough time, and the only moment that I saw is when Stella is leaving. Jeff asks her to hand him a set of binoculars that are hanging on a peg by the door, which are up some steps. And Jeff, being in a wheelchair, couldn't get to those. And those binoculars he uses as his first close-up view on Thorwald's apartment, which increases his suspicions, which then makes him think, oh, I've got a camera with a telephoto lens. I can get even closer. And those binoculars are used throughout the film to get closer looks at Thorwald and his apartment. That's the only special tool that I saw, really, other than Jeff's camera, but he's got that at hand.
I wrote down exactly the same thing.
Are you
That's
serious?
exactly what I had. Yep, the binoculars
How funny.
are the supernatural aid.
We're both right, then.
Yeah. Another mentor moment is when Stella, right after she enters, she warns Jeff that the sentence for peeping Toms is 6 months at the workhouse. And
Right.
she even says,
We become a race of peeping Toms. What people ought to do is get outside their own house and look in for a change.
but what happens is he doesn't leave his apartment until Thorwald throws him out of his apartment. He literally does not look back at his own house until that moment.
Yeah.
And that's that moment that changes his relationship path. So I thought it was a brilliant, subtle piece of writing.
Yeah, I
but
didn't
she's
pick up
right.
on that. That's wonderful.
She's right. Remember,
Well done.
Yeah, and she's the one who wants to go dig up the flower bed too. She and Lisa are like, let's go. So she is definitely the Yoda pretending to be this sort of like this funny working class broad, but
Right.
she's the one guiding him in his life.
Yeah, yeah.
So that moves us into crossing of the threshold. The hero must pass a barrier to enter the special world, and this crossing represents the hero's commitment to taking on the adventure. It's strange. I think Jeff's threshold crossing actually happens in Act 2 of the film. There's a lot of plot here that I'm going to skip as I call this out. So there's Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 of the hero's journey, and then there's traditional screenplay structure and film structure.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of mixing the two here because I think this part of Act 1 of the hero's journey actually occurs in Act 2 of the screenplay and of the film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as we said in episode 0 of this show, we present them linearly just to have a framework, but
Yeah.
they don't always show up in the same spot every time.
Well, and I know I've harped on about film structure almost relentlessly throughout this whole thing. You know, this has to happen by page 30 and this has to happen. Well, Hitchcock really obeyed the conventions of story structure for the most part, and John Michael Hayes did too. And so I think it's particularly significant when they deviate from it, because that's a strong choice. And I think it says something about Jeff's character, because he is a resistant dude.
Let's hear it.
And that opening shot where you see the picture of the car coming at him and the tire falling off, like Jeff has so much inertia in his life that he stands in front of race cars. I think that's like symbolic of who he is. Like, I'm going to break my leg and stay in this apartment and not get married and not change. He's very much a anti-change character. Okay, so
Yeah, I thought that was a really great piece of non-verbal visual storytelling. That
so
introduction of Jeff and the courtyard. It's so great. You learn his name, his occupation, why he's in the condition he's in without a single word of dialogue. It's so brilliant.
It's brilliant. So in my commitment to sticking to the hero's journey and not to the plot, I think Jeff truly crosses the threshold into the adventure when he first puts the binoculars to his face to watch the salesman through his window. I think that's the crossing of the threshold. Hitchcock dollies in on Jeff as he raises the binoculars to his eyes, and we see the building across the courtyard reflected in the lenses.
Yeah.
There's subtle piano music in the background coming from the musician's apartment. And for a movie that takes place almost entirely in an apartment, very little camera movement, that is a big cinematic moment in this movie. Jeff's peering in now.
Yep.
He's in.
Yep, I'm with you.
And here's another tidbit. Except for the score during the opening and the closing of the film, all the sound in Rear Window is diegetic. So its source is seen on screen at some point. The music is all from radios that we see or from the piano. The background noise, if they're cars, they're driving by on the street that we can see.
Yep.
The conversations coming from other apartments in eye glance or earshot of Jeff's window. It's an incredibly strong choice for a movie, especially during this period of time.
Yeah.
So that's crossing to the threshold.
Yeah.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll have Act 2. Dan, what are you watching? What are you reading? What are you playing?
I actually had a pretty decent month in terms of reading. I read a book called The Travelers by Chris Pavone. It's a book about a field reporter for a travel magazine. Due to his frequency of international travel, he is recruited by some type of espionage agency.
Ooh.
And things happen. I enjoyed it. I had fun with it. It was like a popcorn movie. Then for this wine book club that I'm involved in that I keep talking about, on Audible, I read a book called Extra Virginity, The Sublime and Scandalous World of Olive Oil.
Extra Virginity.
It was much more interesting than I expected it to be. The author visits various independent small producers of olive oil and discusses their troubles, and then also talks to the big names that you see in the grocery store. Kind of exposes how a lot of times the olive oil that you buy at the grocery store, some of it isn't actually olive oil. There might be other types of oil mixed in, cheaper oils like seed oils and things like that.
Okay.
To cut down on the cost.
You're telling me the 1.75 liter jug of olive oil I buy at Costco is not olive oil?
Ooh, also, don't buy that much olive oil if you don't use it right away. Olive oil goes bad very quickly. I also read a book by Augustin Burroughs called A Wolf at the Table. You might know the name Augustin Burroughs.
I do.
His debut, Running with Scissors. You're making this really weird.
This month
smile.
I read a book by his brother. That's why I'm sort of
Oh,
flipping
no
out.
way!
Yeah, I read his brother's book.
And so A Wolf at the Table is about Augustin Burroughs' father. And that guy was a sociopath.
Whoa.
A real piece of work.
Whoa.
Terrifying. The stuff that he put Augustin through, I kept really wishing that this was a fictional novel. As far as watching, there's a Netflix comedy special called Elder Millennial. Do you know who Eliza Schlesinger? It was hilarious.
Huh.
She is she's got fantastic vocal and physical comedy. Really great. Really enjoyed it. The theme is modern dating.
Okay.
And then I also watched the 1998 remake of Rear Window, starring Christopher Reeve
Oh, man.
and Daryl Hannah. Not great.
No.
Interesting, because Christopher Reeve was actually wheelchair bound after his accident.
Right.
But what you might find interesting about this is that it was written by Eric Ellis Overmyer, who you know as the showrunner and creator of Bosch.
No way.
How about you? What have you been?
That's amazing. Well, I'll start with watching. I finished season 4 of Bosch.
Yep.
It's hard to describe my love for that show. So as you know, I'm a disciple of Connolly's Bosch novels.
You sure are.
His novels are pretty hard-boiled detective novels. I mean, it's Bosch working on 2 cases, and there's always a personal subplot. But the show takes those characters and blows them up into 3D. You know, it's not a cop show. It's a show about a cop. And what I mean by that is it's not a procedural Law and Order show. This show is about Bosch. And so the relationships and the characters are so much deeper in the show than they are in the books. And Connolly, not only does he write a lot for the show, he's an executive producer. He's on the set. He is helping craft the arc of the seasons. So it's a great adaptation because they're not trying to filmify the books. They're taking the source material and going, how can we make a great television show? On the reading, I've read a lot of books since the last. It's been a long time since we recorded. We recorded early last month. I'm recording late this month.
Yeah. Pick your top 10.
I read 4 books. So
Okay.
I finished Screenplay: The Foundations of Screenwriting by Sid Field, And then I read Look Me in the Eye, My Life with Asperger's by John Elder Robinson, which was written by the brother of Augustine Burroughs.
Really?
Yeah, they grew up in the same house. So he gets mentioned
they did.
in Running with Scissors. So it's his memoir of growing up with Asperger's. And then I read An Unquiet Mind, a memoir of moods and madness by K. Redfield Jameson, which is about bipolar disorder. And holy cow, was that an incredible, disturbing book. I think I actually enjoyed The Center Cannot Hold, the schizophrenia book, more than this one. But this was a really engaging, again, written by an academic with a PhD who's a professional and dealt with severe bipolar disorder and manic psychosis and all of that stuff.
Wow,
and
you've been reading a lot of these.
Yeah, mental health's been on my mind.
Yeah.
And then I just finished The Late Show by Michael Connelly, which is introducing his new detective, Renee Ballard. It was great. It's about a female detective who has been relegated to the night shift because she was sexually harassed by her supervisor and called him out, and her partner didn't back her up. So she got ousted politically from RHD, Robbery Homicide Division. So she was working at
That's the same one that Bosch got booted from.
Right. So now she's working the night shift, and the night shift detectives, they never get to keep cases. They just have to open them and hand them off to the day guys because nothing happens at night. So she can't really ever get involved in a case, and she wants to, solve cases. So she's constantly trying to maneuver and delay when she reports things so that she can keep working on cases.
Oh, wow.
It was fantastic for two reasons, above and beyond a great detective story and good writing. It dealt pretty realistically with sexism in the LAPD, but also one of the victims is transgender.
Oh.
And so it deals with the sort of institutional prejudice against transgender people, especially transgender victims. And Renee Ballard isn't like a social justice warrior, but she's constantly defending the victim's pronouns in a way that's realistic and great. So that's what I read.
Wow.
And when we come back, we'll have Act 2.
Act 2 begins with tests, allies, and enemies. The hero makes allies, meets enemies, and must pass a series of tests to prove their worthiness. The allies are very clear. Stella Lisa Doyle.
Boom.
That's it. The enemies, Thorwald. He's the only enemy in this movie. This is a very clean-cut section.
Good guys and bad guys.
And then the tests. Jeff, having introduced his suspicions to his allies, now has to try to convince them that he's right. So much of the movie is that, and it would just be going in. It would be going into a plot summary discussion again if I elaborate on that anymore.
It's a murder mystery. He's collecting clues to solve the murder.
Exactly.
And the thing that makes this movie different is that he's in a wheelchair and all he can do is see out his window. Yeah. That's the limitation.
And there's discussions with Doyle, Jeff's ex-Army World War II buddy. They flew in a plane together.
Right.
Doyle is now a detective for the New York Police Department. And Doyle does some snooping on his own to help Jeff. And he keeps finding evidence that shoots down all of Jeff's suspicions.
Right.
He's finding evidence, witnesses who say they saw Mrs. Thorwald get on a train, and the trunk is full of Mrs. Thorwald's clothes and not her body, as Jeff suspects.
Right.
He keeps poking holes in Jeff's theories.
If you're listening to this and you haven't seen the movie, essentially Jeff forms this theory that so Thorwald goes out in the night and he's got his case. After we hear the breaking of the glass and the scream
in the pouring rain,
he's going out 2-3 times that night
morning.
with his sample case.
Yeah.
And then the next day we see him putting his samples back in the case. So what was in the case last night? Oh my God, it was her body.
Right.
He was
and Mrs. Thorwald is no longer visible. From Jeff's window, he can see Thorwald's kitchen window, his living room window, and the bedroom window.
Right.
And Mrs. Thorwald being... Jeff calls her an invalid, but she gets up and walks around. It's not like she's bedridden. So I thought that was weird language, but he only ever sees her in the bedroom, usually in bed, except when she gets up to harass Lars about how the dinner isn't cooked properly. But now Mrs. Thorwald is not there.
Right. She's gone.
And he didn't see her leave, so he assumes murder.
We do see Thorwald leave the apartment the next morning with a woman in a hat. We don't see her face.
Right.
Jeff doesn't see that.
Right.
But then later Doyle reports that she was seen.
The superintendent, 2 different tenants saw it. A
Right.
bunch of people at the train station saw a woman get on the train after
that
Thorwald bought her a ticket.
That was one point of the plot that I thought was a crappy red herring. Because Thorwald's been making all these long-distance calls, so we assume that whoever he's calling is far away. Are we to understand the girlfriend came to his apartment and then left with him that morning and pretended to be...
Right.
It's like, that's kind of weak.
It was a little odd.
That was a cheat to make us wonder, is it true or not? And I didn't think you needed that.
And it was for the viewer.
Yes.
Because Jeff doesn't see that.
So while we're talking about this long clue-finding experience...
yeah, okay.
So I just want to take this opportunity to bring up some sort of funny things. So he's starting to convince Stella, the insurance company nurse, that something's going on. So Stella comes over and they're looking out the window, and these two shipping company guys are taking the trunk that Thorwald has apparently packed his wife's body parts in.
Uh-huh.
And Jimmy Stewart's trying to eat breakfast, and like Stella's speculating about him cutting up her body, and all of a sudden Jimmy Stewart's looking at his bacon like, I don't want to eat this.
Right.
And then she's talking about all the blood, and now he can't drink his coffee.
Yeah.
And it's like these cheesy comedy moments that Hitchcock was famous for.
Yeah.
And the other thing, though, was interesting because Jimmy Stewart's the squeamish one, not her,
Right.
and not Lisa. He's the one who really can't handle the details of the murder.
Yeah.
It's Lisa who ends up, risking life and limb.
Yeah.
So Jimmy Stewart is so funny in some of these moments. The other scene that was funny, Doyle and Lisa and Jeff are discussing the case, and they all have a snifter of brandy.
Yeah.
And they're all swirling
it
brandy.
in unison.
So I Googled, why do people swirl brandy? And the first 3 hits were about Rear Window.
Yeah, and how you don't need to.
Well, no, I found this website that apparently Hitchcock thought it was funny that they would all be swirling their brandy, and so he just had them all do it. And one fan site said that it was supposed to be some kind of sexual innuendo about her breasts, like her breasts would jiggle or something.
I read that article because she
Yeah.
comes out of the kitchen holding 2 snifters of brandy right in front of her breasts.
I didn't get that.
I didn't get that as suggestive humor
I just pictured Hitchcock on the set going, no, keep swirling your brandy. This will work. It's so bizarre.
Again, another one of those moments where you get a glimpse of society at that period in time. Right. Nobody watching that movie today is going to see that and go, oh, the brandy snifters are in front of her.
The other thing I want to say that I love about the script, about the acting, and about Hitchcock is that Detective Doyle is a dick. Both times that he has a scene with Jimmy Stewart, he saves back a piece of evidence.
On his way out the door. By the way,
here's this postcard that totally invalidates your theory.
Oh, I almost forgot. There was a postcard in Thorwald's mailbox. It was mailed 3:30 yesterday afternoon from Marrittsville. That's 80 miles north of here. The message went, arrived okay, already feeling better. Love, Anna.
Anna, is that who I think it is?
Mrs. Thorwald.
And then he does it again with that was the call that happened 10 minutes before. That was them confirming that it was Thorwald. So he's such a dick. But the other thing that I love about it is at one point he says, how did we ever stand each other on the plane?
Yeah.
How did we stand each other? And it's a great relationship moment because war would bring you together, even with people that you couldn't stand, but you would form that bond.
Yeah.
And I thought that was one of the most realistic male relationships I've seen on screen from a movie in that time, is that they don't really like each other, but they respect each other and they owe each other, and they'd both do anything for the other person if they had to, even though they don't want to hang out. Like their lives do not intersect until I need a detective or I need a photographer. I thought that was really great.
They have some good jabs that they throw at each other when Doyle's on his way out the door once and he's, you need anything, Jeff?
Yeah, good.
Like, you might send me a good detective.
That's the best Nicolas Cage.
What accent is that? What accent is that? I don't know what accent I was doing just now, but anyway.
Do you want to keep espousing tests, or do you
want
to just move on?
I feel like there's maybe a couple of moments that need to be highlighted just because they become important later, where like Lisa is talking about the handbag that is hanging on the bedpost, and she says no woman would ever leave her handbag behind. Jeff, through his binoculars or the telephoto lens on his camera, sees Thorwald sitting in the living room going through the handbag, and it's just stuffed with jewelry.
Yeah.
And Lisa says no woman would put her jewelry in a handbag getting all tangled up and scratched and whatnot.
He also sees Thorwald folding up a saw and a machete in newspaper.
Yeah, wrapping it in newspaper in the kitchen sink. And yeah, so stuff like that. These are the things that support Jeff's theory that there's foul play.
I suggest we move on to Approach to the Inmost Cave and see where we drew the line.
Yeah.
Approach to the Inmost Cave. The hero reaches the edge of a dangerous place where the object of his quest is hidden. There's not a lot of geographic moving in this movie. It all takes place in one room. So the place, the dangerous place, is really an event.
Yep.
To me, the moment that heralds Approach to the Inmost Cave is we hear his scream and the dog is dead. The upstairs neighbors have a dog that they lower in like a pulley system in a basket to go so they can go to potty, I assume, in the courtyard. And at one point, Thorwald sees it digging up his flower bed and he shoos the dog away.
But in a gentle way.
In a gentle way,
You think, or, well, actually maybe the viewer, through Jeff, thinks that Thorwald's about to do something bad to the dog because Jeff thinks Thorwald is a bad man, but Thorwald comes over and he pats the dog and says, run along now.
Yeah, he's very gentle with the dog.
He's very gentle with the dog, which then puts doubt in your mind. Like, oh, this is maybe not an evil man after all.
So right prior to this moment, Doyle's just left the apartment, and basically they're thinking, oh, Jeff's finally admitting, like, okay, maybe I am wrong, maybe I am paranoid, I'm reading into this. Clearly all the evidence is stacking up that he's fine. And then we hear a scream, and the lady on the top floor looks down from the balcony. Her dog is dead, right near the flower bed.
Right.
Thorwald's flower bed that he's been tending.
Right.
And Jeff realizes the only neighbor that doesn't come to the window is Thorwald. He's sitting in his apartment in the dark, smoking
all
a cigar.
All you see is the glowing red embers. It's kind of a sinister image.
He's really well played by Raymond Burr as this powerless man who's been totally emasculated by his wife. And he's clearly angry and feels totally powerless, and he's frustrated. The next day, Lisa and Stella are in the apartment with Jeff, and they're watching Thorwald scrub down the walls of his apartment. And Jeff notices that the flowers in the flower bed are shorter than they were 2 weeks ago. And he pulls out this photo that he's taken of the yard, and they're comparing the slide to the actual thing, and they think something's buried there. That's why the dog was killed. It was digging something up. They see Thorwald packing like he's getting ready to leave for good. So Jeff writes a note to Thorwald. What have you done with her? And Lisa goes over there and slips it under the door and rings the doorbell.
Yep.
And Thorwald opens the door, gets the note, reads the note, and Jeff sees his guilty reaction. He looks around like, oh, who sent this note? And now we're like, oh, he did it. And Lisa barely makes it out without being seen by Thorwald. We have to stop. We have to pause here and do Deal or Ordeal, or we're going to blow it. All right, okay. Pause crossing of the threshold here. You know what?
We have to
exchange. All right, so we're pausing in the middle of the approach.
We're just doing this, handing the sheets
so
across.
So I'm going to read what Dan wrote.
Hey!
Jeffries watches helpless as Lisa is confronted by Thorwald.
Yep. Thorwald assaults Lisa in his apartment.
Yay!
Hey! We're the same Z's.
Yes.
You win.
So I'll just finish up with my approach then, and you tell me if I've left anything out. So Stella and Lisa then decide they need to dig up the flower bed. So Jeff calls Thorwald and sets up a fake blackmail meeting to draw him out of the apartment. That's the approach.
Did you get my note? Well, Thorwald, did you get it?
I'll lasso the moon for you.
Did you get my note, Thorwald?
Oh, my.
Oh, did you get it?
Is that? Are you doing Adam Sandler?
I don't know what I'm doing. Ordeal. The hero faces the ultimate test, often risking death to overcome his worst fear, sometimes actually appearing to die. Now, in this case, the hero is not risking death himself, but his girlfriend Lisa is acting as a surrogate by breaking into Thorwald's apartment while Thorwald has left to go to the Albert Hotel to meet his blackmailer.
Fictional blackmailer.
So Lisa and Stella don't find anything in the flower bed.
Right.
But Lisa's not giving up. She climbs the fire escape, sneaks into an open window in Thorwald's apartment, finds the handbag. There's nothing in the handbag. She searches around, finds the ring. Then we see Thorwald returning to his apartment. Jeff is absolutely terrified. Lisa can't get out now. We see her scurry back and forth trying to find a hiding place as Thorwald enters his apartment.
Some of Jimmy Stewart's best performance is he is powerless and terrified and just biting his fists and oh no.
Yeah.
As an actor, the camera's in your face. There's nothing to look at. You're just making it all up. It's like green screen acting. And he's on the edge of his seat, and you feel for him like he can't do anything.
Yeah.
He's a war hero who gets in the middle of the action and all he can do is watch.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
It's the perfect ordeal for L.B. Jeffries. He can do nothing. And
he is watching the woman he loves be potentially victimized by a man that he thinks has already murdered somebody.
he's been saying, you can't handle the adventure. You couldn't handle being on the road. You can't. And she's trying to prove it to him.
Yeah.
And now her life's at stake.
When we actually skipped this moment in Approach to the Cave, when she returns finally from delivering the note.
Right.
And she's excited when she enters Jeff's apartment again. And the look on Jeff's face is one of complete adoration.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, she is adventurous.
Yeah.
Something changes there for Jeff.
So she finds the jewelry. Jeff calls the police before they can get there.
Well, and this is another thing that I thought was a little clunky. The apartment below Thorwald's is Miss Lonely Hearts.
Right.
And throughout the film, we've been seeing her have difficult times. We see her pantomime a dinner date.
Right, she's rehearsing.
With somebody who's with a phantom date. We see her go out to a bar that's conveniently within view of the alley that Jeff can see.
Yeah.
And come home with a young man, and he tries to force himself on her, and she successfully, thankfully, gets him to leave before anything really bad happens. And so we're seeing her go through this difficult time. And it is on this night that she has chosen to take a bunch of pills. And Stella sees this as they're watching Lisa run around back and forth looking for evidence while Thorwald's out. And Stella says, "Oh, Jeff, call the police. Miss Lonely Hearts is about to commit suicide." So they do call the police. But by that time, the musician and his band, I'm assuming, are playing a song, and the song stops Miss Lonely Hearts, and she comes to the window to listen to the music. You know, and now Jeff can call the police to come help Lisa.
Right.
I thought that was a little
convenient that
all their all of that was
line
happening
up,
at the same time.
Yeah.
But I forgive it because it's a fun movie. I enjoy the movie. And in the fastest police response in history, the police show up like within 30 seconds and interrupt Thorwald's assault of Lisa.
Reward, seizing the sword, the ultimate boon. Having faced his worst fear, the hero seizes the object of his quest. The police rescue Lisa by arresting her, but she's got the wedding ring. That's evidence that the wife didn't willingly leave the apartment. That's the sword she seizes, and it's also the reward for her risk.
Right.
And that brings us to the end of Act 2.
Whoa. Well, shall we take a beverage break there, Jeffrey?
Well, gosh, I'm kind of thirsty. All right, that's the end of Act 2. We're going to take a drink, and we'll be back.
It's the beverage break. Before I hand the bag to you...
Give me the bag, Dan.
There is a French novel based on the character Miss Lonely Hearts.
What?
It was dedicated to the actress Judith Evelyn, and it retells scenes from the film Rear Window from Miss Lonely Heart's perspective.
It's like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead for Rear Window.
Yeah.
Wow.
I would be interested in reading it, but it's in French, and from what I could tell, it was not translated into English, and I can barely even read the menu at a French restaurant. So anyway, it's called Mademoiselle Cour Solitaire, and my apologies to any French-speaking listeners who I just murdered your ears with that presentation.
That wasn't too bad.
Pronunciation.
That wasn't bad.
Let's have a drink. Take this bag.
All right.
What is it?
What is it? It's Fremont. Fremont Interurban IPA, as in Lisa Carroll Fremont.
Yeah.
Fremont, Seattle, because beer matters. Interurban IPA. I love it. Hold on, here, take yours. Let's.
Fremont Brewing in Seattle. They market themselves as a eco-friendly brewer. They use steam instead of natural gas. They put their beers in cans instead of bottles because cans contain more recycled material than bottles, and they're lighter, so transporting them uses less fuel, lower carbon emissions.
Wow.
Pretty neat, huh? Let's pop these open.
Ooh, I like it. It's harsh. It's bitter on the back end, but there's a sweetness to it.
Yeah, what is that?
It's got like a grapefruit back, but there's something very bitter about it. I kind of like the bitterness of IPAs. It's only 6.2% ABV. We're going to switch to glasses and see if it tastes any different.
Yeah, I'm going to put mine in a glass. I just want to see the color.
It's a honey amber.
Honey is a good word for that. That's way more orange than I expected.
Ooh, it's got chunks of something floating in it. Is that citrus? Look at that.
I know.
There are big chunks of peel or what? What is in there? Is that a mistake or is that?
I don't know. Is
some
that
serious
is that part of the
particulate.
design? Is there anything on the
Northwest pale malt swirled with hand-selected blend of Chinook, Centennial, and Amarillo hops. Fremont brew. I don't know what's in there, but I mean, there's definitely some particulate in there. Is it unfiltered? I
Dude,
don't know.
those are chunks. Those are not. That's not particulate.
It looks like the peel.
You want to fish them out?
I'm kind of afraid to drink it now. Like if someone poured this to me,
Well, fish it out
in a bar, I would be like, "What?"
I've got some, but they're not nearly as big as that. Mine are like, oh yeah, no, I do have like big chunks of something in the bottom now.
All right, so visually not terribly appetizing, but it's got a good foam on it. It is bitter. There is literally an 1.5 inch long chunk of something in my beer, and it keeps falling to the bottom and then rising again with the carbonation. Sorry, Fremont Brewery, but we're kind of at this point we're sort of like
A little freaked out
here.
I'm gonna keep drinking it, but I would love to know what the heck this is, if it's intentional or not.
Put this on the bitter side of the IPA scale. I taste a little bit of citrus in there.
I'm not smelling real grapefruit, but what I'm smelling is like a synthetic citrus scent
Like
that you would
pine
get
sol.
in cleaning products or something.
Let's just be honest. This is kidney failure yellow. It's got chunks of stuff in it, and it doesn't taste.
It tastes okay.
It's fine. This is how you know we're not being paid by the brewer.
Yeah, we go out and buy our beverages. We're not sponsored by anybody.
Let's be honest. I pay for the web hosting. Dan goes out and buys the beverages. All right.
Huh.
I'm going to finish it, but
I am too, but I'm going to say that this is the least exciting.
I mean, we're usually
one
really
so
enthusiastic about drinking just about anything, and this is definitely on the low end of. If this were a book, I would not finish reading it.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't have to finish drinking
No,
it.
I'm going to drink it. All right. Well, let's
move on to Act 3.
go on to Act 3.
Act 3 begins with the road back, where the hero is pursued by vengeful forces that he disturbed when he or she seized the sword. The sword in this case being Mrs. Thorwald's wedding ring. The evidence,
My precious.
circumstantial though it may be,
Yeah, that's the other. It's like super circumstance.
that supposedly damns Thorwald. But anyway, so Lisa is arrested. So as the police are arresting Lisa and questioning Thorwald, Lisa holds her hands behind her back with her back to Jeff's apartment and very obviously gesticulates with her hands and shows that she is now wearing Mrs. Thorwald's wedding ring. She's so obvious about it that Thorwald, who's standing right next to her, looks down and sees this and then looks up directly at Stella and Jeff, who are in the window with the light on. It's way too late, Jeff, when he says, Stella, turn out the light. He's seen us. It's too late.
You get the feeling
that was like
you get the feeling that there's only one apartment on Jeff's side of the building. Like, not only did Thorwald see the ring, but he was able to identify which window.
Right.
They do beat into our heads by showing us the thermometer and people sweating that the reason why everyone's got their windows open and their shades up is because it's so hot.
Yeah.
Look, everyone, it's hot. That's why the windows are open. You can see everything.
And this was before the advent of air conditioning.
Was it?
I'm assuming.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. I don't know when air conditioners were
They're spending
invented.
$3,000 a month on rent. They can't afford air conditioning.
Oh, gosh. The police take Lisa away. Stella and Jeff pool their financial resources for bail money. And Stella takes the money and runs out the apartment. She's going to try to go bail out Lisa.
For $300, or $150. What is it?
I don't remember what he said it was.
A bargain.
He knew, like, off the top of his head, well, it's a first offense.
Right.
First offense breaking and entering. It's going to be $200 and something. I'm like, what? How? Why do you know that?
Yeah.
But anyway, Doyle calls. And Jeff, in this really bizarre whispering dialogue thing, he whispers to Doyle through the phone, and he tells him everything that just happened, that Lisa got arrested.
Like,
and she went to
I'll stand in the window in broad daylight and look.
Stella's gonna go bail her out, but Thorwald's packing up and he's gonna leave tonight. It's this really strange moment. I don't understand. Why can't you talk in a normal voice? Is it because everybody's windows are open and he's afraid Thorwald's standing in his apartment listening to Jeff? I
think that's one of
guess
those
because it's established
build the
throughout the
tension,
film that
yeah.
you can hear everybody's conversations in this courtyard.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what it was. But anyway, I just thought it was weird. So Doyle says he'll go to the precinct, help out Lisa, and they'll check out the ring. And that's probably going to be enough to put Thorwald away. I don't know. Maybe not.
Well, and now Thorwald has assaulted Lisa, so there's something to investigate.
Well, Thorwald was assaulting somebody who had broken into his apartment and was
Right.
stealing things.
And apparently assaulting a woman totally okay in this movie, because the assault that happens downstairs to Miss Lonely Hearts, no one ever talks about calling the police or going over there to check on her. They just watch it, and
That's
Grace
true.
watches it. Or,
It just happens,
Lisa watches
yeah.
it like, oh, that's an unfortunate side effect of
They're
dating.
very passive
Is
about
that
it. It was.
yeah.
You're right. That was strange.
Violence against women is totally a theme in this movie.
Ay.
Like, yikes. And Miss Torso like has to fight off a guy that's trying to get into her apartment and slams the door on him. It's like every man in this movie except for Doyle and Jeff are horrible men.
Like harass somebody. The songwriter's okay.
Hey, I guess the newlywed husband is okay too.
He's a victim
Right, he's a victim of her
of his over-amorous newlywed bride.
Right.
Anyway, okay, so Doyle and Jeff hang up, and then the phone rings again. And Jeff picks up the phone and starts talking to him like he assumes it's Doyle.
Right.
And then he realizes his mistake. The line disconnects, and he realizes, oopsie. Shortly thereafter, he hears heavy footsteps tromping up the steps and down the hallway toward his apartment.
Right.
And he knows Thorwald's coming for him. This is the vengeful force.
Indeed.
Thorwald enters Jeff's apartment, demands the ring back. Jeff says, please have it by now. I don't have the ring. Thorwald assaults Jeff and tries to throw him out his window. His apartment window.
But in one of Hitchcock's crazy technological moments, one of the signals that Jeff is going to give Lisa in the prior scene is he'll set off a flashbulb, and that will signal that they need to come back in from digging up the garden.
Yeah.
Of course, that doesn't happen. So now he's got his flashbulb in his hands. So he doesn't have any weapons. He's looking, as Thorwald's tromping up the stairs, Jeff's looking around for a weapon or something to defend himself. He tries to get out of his wheelchair. He can't get out of his wheelchair. Oh, he's stuck. So he grabs his camera flash.
Yeah.
And Thorwald comes into the dark apartment. And it's a dramatic lighting choice, but like light from somewhere is just showing us Thorwald's creepy eyes, right?
Yeah.
And then as he's
It's like
approaching,
moonlight from the window or something.
Jeff sets off covers his eyes and sets off the flashbulb.
Yeah.
And like this orange special effects circle
Right.
pops on screen, which I think we're supposed to see is like the after effects of the flashbulb in the darkness for Thorwald.
Yes.
And he must stop immediately and reach up and adjust his glasses. And then he can see perfectly again a moment later.
Right.
Which
Takes
is not
two
how
steps.
that's not how that works. If you're in
Yeah.
a dark room in a flat, you would be
Oh.
blinded for 40 seconds.
Yeah, it's pretty
But he has to
impressive.
stop, and then he takes a few more steps, and then another pop. It's like, that doesn't work at all.
And the not only that, but the special effects department went through some iterations of that effect to get that image. They stood in a dark room and activated a flash, and they all just said, okay, what do you see? That's what they came up with.
I wonder how that sequence was perceived by audiences of the day. Because obviously now the effects are terribly dated and don't print like accurate special effects. But I wonder if for the time that was like, and because Hitchcock always did one or two things in his movies that was super technologically interesting, and usually at the climax. I think I'm thinking of Vertigo. I'm thinking of Psycho.
Psycho, the falling down backwards off the stairs.
Right.
Like yeah.
Dramatic camera placement choices or zoom dolly combinations. You know, the Vertigo classic, dolly back, zoom in to elongate the Z-axis. I mean, all those
Right.
things that he does, they were groundbreaking.
Spielberg borrowed in Jaws.
Right, exactly. I mean, lots of filmmakers have borrowed it, but it's the thing is, it's such a dramatic choice that it immediately pulls you out of the movie and into, oh, that's the Hitchcock thing. Maybe that's just a film student moment. I don't know. But yeah, I wonder how that printed to audiences at the time. It totally takes away from the tension. Anyway, it would have been better if you just approached him in the dark and threw him out the window. You didn't need that.
Right.
I'm a photographer. Anyway, so
They struggle. Doyle and a cadre of police officers run across the courtyard to try to help, just as Jeff falls out the window. And fortunately, 2 officers are at the bottom to help break his fall.
The shot where he falls out the window was interesting too.
Yeah.
Clearly some kind of a projection screen or something.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't fall.
He doesn't move much.
He doesn't. Yeah. It's like, or maybe the camera moved away from him. I don't know. It's hard to print, but it was not a
It was interesting.
Stunt actor. All right, so that moves us on to resurrection. The hero is purified by death in a literal or symbolic way and returns to the land of the living, a changed person. So Jeff survives the fall. Doyle arrives with the police backup. They apprehend Thorwald, who admits within
in 5 seconds. 5 seconds, he gives them the whole story. Why?
Right. Not only were their body parts buried in the flower bed, and he agrees to show the police where he dumped the rest of the body in the East River. It's like so compressed.
Yeah. Maybe when Jeff hit the ground, he lost consciousness for a minute.
I think it was just an accelerated, because he's still lying there on the ground, and the nurse is saying, "Go get my medical kit." I mean, it's in real time. It's just apparently Thorwald confesses a lot very quickly. I mean, it was just an expedited, "Hey, let's get to the end of this."
You know what? He felt guilty. He had to get it off his chest.
But you know what?
He didn't want to run anymore.
Flash forward 40 years, and you've got the same bullshit going on in Act 3 of The Rock, where they're in a just married car in Kansas. Like, it's just... Hey, let's wrap this thing up real quick. We've only got 5 pages of screenplay left. So that's resurrection.
Which brings us to the end. Return with the elixir or freedom to live. The hero, having won some precious treasure or reward, now returns to the ordinary world to share the spoils of battle. I guess having helped solve the murder and catch the killer, Jeff has restored order and balance to the neighborhood, perhaps. Maybe that's the sharing the spoils of battle. All we see really is there's no dialogue at the end of this film. All we see is another mimicking the camera move, introducing all of the neighbors at the beginning of the film. We see the neighbors now at the end of the film. Miss Lonely Hearts and the songwriter are now in the songwriter's apartment, and Miss Lonely Hearts is listening to a record of the songwriter's music and talking about how much his music means to her.
Yeah, he's finally...
Literally saved her life because she was about to kill herself. So the two single people... This has brought them together.
Yeah.
The dog owners, they have a new puppy. Miss Torso's...
Resurrection, the dog.
Oh, there you
Right?
go. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also maybe a resurrection for Miss Lonely Hearts.
Yeah.
Because she was about to kill herself.
Yeah.
Miss Torso's either boyfriend or husband, Stanley, comes home.
Right.
And we see Jeff. He's asleep in his wheelchair again. He's got 2 broken legs now.
Right.
We pan over to Lisa, who every scene prior, she's wearing this high fashion dress or gown. Now she's wearing sensible walking shoes, some pants, and a buttoned up shirt. And she's reading a book called Beyond the High Himalayas, which is an actual book.
Oh, I'm adding it to my TBR on Goodreads. Hold on.
Which kind of suggests the successful meshing of their 2 worlds. Now, of course, she does notice that he's asleep, and she puts the book down and picks up a copy of Bazaar. But those 2 worlds have now joined, where Lisa has successfully proven herself to Jeff, where he's willing to maybe give this another go. I don't know. You see a change in Lisa.
Agreed. The ordinary world is Jeff stuck in his apartment with a broken leg. And so we have that unity of we're back and Jeff stuck in his apartment with a broken leg.
For another 2 months, probably.
Right. So he's cooped up again, but he's smiling. He's sleeping, but he's smiling.
He is. Yeah, that's right.
He's got Lisa to keep him company. And like you said, she's reading this book, Beyond the High Himalayas, and then she switches to the beauty magazine. So, but I think, there's a Campbell element, the master of 2 worlds.
Right.
The Master of 2 Worlds happens on 2 levels. Like you said, Lisa is still in the fashion world reading the magazine, but she's also adopted this new sense of adventure.
Correct.
And I think for Jeff, he gets to have his romance with Lisa and his adventurous life. I think the idea of him being cooped up in this apartment is that it forces him to feel what it's like to settle down. He can't.
Oh, yeah. That's
right?
good.
This is his, you have to stay in the same place for a certain period of time. So as I was thinking about the end of this movie, I was getting all indignant, being like, well, Lisa does all the changing in this book. She has to go jump all these hoops, risk her life, and at the end, she's the master of the 2 worlds. And I think there's a little bit of asymmetry in their relationship in that I don't get why she's pursuing this guy, but we don't really get to see.
Yeah.
On the one hand, he is an attractive, adventurous, sort of semi-famous photographer. He's shot magazine covers, so I get how their lives intersected. She's the sort of socialite and he's the artist. That makes sense. But it was really nice to see the two of them come together at the end of that movie. I wish there'd been some sense of that Jeff had more sacrifice than he did, because I feel like she's giving up more than he is for them to stay together. She's had to take on this adventurous life. And the only thing I could think of as well, he spent 7 weeks in a cast, and now he's going to spend however much longer in a cast.
Right.
But you get the sense that maybe, if you flash forward a year from now, they will have spent, okay, let's spend 3 months in New York, and then we'll go on an adventure, and then I'll come back and work in the city. You get the sense that they've met. There's a meeting of the minds. They've both recognized the parts of one another that are different, and then they're sort of like accepting it. That is it for this episode. Join us next month when we will be analyzing Christopher Nolan's 2008 comic book opus, The Dark Knight.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you love what you heard, please leave us a rating on iTunes and review us and tell your friends to listen.
Thanks to Taylor Jordan for our amazing Hero's Journey fanfare and bumper music. You can check him out at dramatics.net. And to Dean Ethington at DAE Design for our logo. And Fremont Brewing for the
chunks in the beer.
The chunky beer.
Rear Window is copyright 1954 Paramount Pictures.
Please follow us on Twitter at Heroes Podcast. You can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Heroes Journey Podcast. And check out our hilarious and informative show notes at heroesjourneypodcast.com.
Until next time.
Journey on.